YouTube, it's Petey Twofinger back at you again with another story time video. I had a friend of mine. He's actually my younger brother's good friend, and there's an age difference. So he was my younger brother's friend. He's my neighbor, and he mentioned to me that he really enjoyed a video where I was talking about my hometown where I grew up. So I'm going to try to remember some of that stuff and recant some tales. This is just a quick video today. Story time, the pipeline. So the pipeline was a natural gas pipeline that ran under the ground, and above ground they had Commonwealth Edison high tension wires. And that's where I grew up. Where I lived, the city of Chicago would be like here with Lake Michigan up here. And then there's a river called the Des Plaines River, the canal that runs like at an angle. So there's some angle streets in Chicago, and then there's some bridges, and so a lot of traffic getting funneled down to those bottlenecks because of the angle that this river runs at. And like me, I lived very close to that river on one side, and my wife lived on the other side of that. So that made traveling just infinitely more time consuming, because if they ever did any, boy, I miss the days when I pitch shifted my voice. I sound like a soprano here. If there was any kind of road construction or anything going on, it was a real nightmare to get through. So pretty much, like I said, where I lived, there was this line, demarcation line by the river, which wasn't natural. They channelized that river, so I don't understand. I guess they did it because they wanted to. They wanted it to meet up with the Illinois River and then eventually end up meeting up with the Mississippi River, is why. That's like that. So in between all the BS, there is a little bit of, probably more BS of me speculating about historical facts, so please don't ever take anything I say on this channel as fact. Now, the pipeline also ran kind of in line with that angle thing, if I think about it. And when we went to look at this house, we were from River Forest, which was much more like the city, like Chicago. When we came out there, we saw people on horseback and all these forests, and then the house is on the end of a dead-end street, and there's this pipeline, which was, there was an easement, and then there was like, it was overgrown, and there was two power towers right, like literally, like if you went out my back door, we had a patio where we ate back there in the summer, and you walked like 25-foot paces, you would hit the tower. And then like that pipeline, there was a trail that was like for motorcycles and snowmobiles and dirt bikes in the middle of it. So that pipeline we built, we would dig and build a jump, ramps to jump on our bikes, motorcycles and BMX, and I was always back there riding my bike. Motorcycle riding, my older brother was much more into that. I rode back there too, but mostly it was building ramps and jumping. Snake hunting, hunting for fool's gold. So there was a kid in the neighborhood where when I started to get to know people, they were like, do you know, we'll call him Jimmy Susu. Do you know, have you met Jimmy Susu? No. Well, Jimmy Susu eats dog feces. If you pay him $1, he'll eat dog feces. And like, nobody liked this guy. There was something wrong with him. I remember his dad was like a fire chief or something. So eventually I got to befriend him, and I was kind of an outcast. my older brother picked on me a lot. So I did hang around with Jimmy Susu, and he had the Radio Shack electronic project kit. We used to build circuits with that and ride our bikes and hunt for fool's gold. That's what he was really into, finding fool's gold and iron pyrite, as he called it. So at this one point where we had first moved in, my brother and I were way down the end of the pipeline, and I was jumping this. It was like a berm, like a hill that came down where there was a little water that ran through there, like a tiny creek. The smallest amount of water that you could call a creek, a moving puddle. And I was jumping this thing, hitting it really hard, and getting some air. I had a Yamaha bike with shock absorbers on it, yellow bike. So we're down there, and we're hearing somebody's running through this small forest, and it's a guy with like a jumpsuit on and a gun case. And my brother tells me, because I was riding, like, here's the jump, and I'm jumping it and coming back talking to my brother, and then I would ride way down there and then get enough momentum and speed and hit the jump again. So I'm down here, and that's in the woods is off over there where I'm hearing this. I'm telling my brother, I'm hearing something big. It sounded like a bear knocking trees down. So I'm freaking out. He's kind of freaking out too, but he won't go over there. So then I see this guy's in the woods hiding. And I'm like, he's got a gun case. And my brother tells me, go over there and ask him what he's hunting for. Or is the hunting any good this day? So we start hearing sirens. Then the guy takes off running. Like, I've never seen anybody run in my life before. I think seemed to remember he had two guns, and they were rifles. One of them was in a case, the other one wasn't cased. And he runs by us, and we're both just watching him. He's totally looking at us. So these the sirens get louder and louder and louder, and then pretty soon, like an unreal amount of police cars come flying up, skid to a halt, and ask us if we've seen anybody come through there. And we go, yeah, he had two guns and a dark blue jumpsuit. And they said, which way did he go? We said, that way. Eat my dust. They light him up and take off. So we thought this guy was an escaped prisoner because of what he had on. I don't think he was a prisoner. I think they went to serve a warrant on this guy, and he took off running. That's what I think it was. That he was either a drug guy or whatever his deal was, but he wasn't going to prison, and he took off running. So back closer to our house, we had that set of power towers, and my older brother wasn't happy that I was hanging around with that Jimmy Susu guy. So we had this new family moved in, the pennies, the nickels, the quarters. We'll call them the Penny family. And it was Mike and Richie, his little brother, that their mom used to always stare out the window, and they wouldn't let us play with them. My older brother probably wanted to like get these kids to come into our little gang, and the mom was like, I'm not letting my kids play with those savages, because she was watching how we played, and we were always like, picking at each other, slamming it was the pecking order. It was the biggest kid picked on the next biggest kid, who was me, and then the other little kids would join in and pick on me. So it was pretty much me just getting constantly thumped and walloped. And this poor woman was terrified, so she didn't want her kids playing with us. Anyway, my brother set up a sniper thing with a pellet gun with a scope with the neighbor kids inside their house, where they blocked off with curtains, and they had another kid looking out other windows and yelling commands and stuff, and they set this thing up I was supposed to have because the kid would never come, they would never come past their driveway. Like their house was here, and the driveway came out, and here was this little stretch of land where those kids would just ride in circles. Or they would just go on their driveway, they would come out, go around, and then go back in. The mom told them, you're not allowed to go past the mailbox or whatever it was. And we are like 2 or 3 houses down where my brother has set up this eagle's nest with this high-powered pellet gun. So my job was to race, to talk this kid into a race. And I'm way bigger than him. I had this bike with the shock absorbers on it, and he had like training wheel bike. And I'm like telling him I'll let him win, and like all the lies that I told to get this kid to go down there. So finally he goes down there, and of course I'm on the outside, he's on the inside, so my brother can't miss. And as soon as we line up, my brother takes the shot and gets the kid in the arm. And he, a bee bit me. A bee bit me. Goes flying home. Thank goodness that he framed it in that mentally, because it would have came down. There would have been an investigation. Now this type of hunting, this setup type of stuff is my brother's specialty. Like they would, this house where he babysat the kids, they had an Atari and a television and all these games. We didn't have any of that. So they would invite me over, wet my whistle, get me to play these games, and then deny it. And they would just tease me about it all the time. And then finally what they would do is set up with wrist rocket slingshots using stale jelly beans that were hard as a rock. And they would set up this house with bows and arrows and snares and traps and throwing the power off. And they would invite me in, and then one kid would run up and lock the door and run away, and they would shut the lights off, and they would be going shh, 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 doing the Friday the 13th stuff, and then they would proceed to like hunt me through this house. And I would play their game. I didn't care. I'd run through there and knock over lamps and break anything that I could in the process of trying to dodge everything and then eventually get out of there. But another one of those plotted things that they used to do was they built these pipe bombs. He would have all these kids come. He got a job at back in groceries and sent me out with a $10 bill to buy matches with the neighbor's dad. So I went and got a cart and figured out the matches were like 19 cents for a box this big, and I had a 10. So I bought exactly the most I could with $10. Might have even been 20, because we had an incredible, it was like a Santa Claus satchel of matches. And I'm this like 9-year-old kid like 600 boxes of matches, and I come up to Kmart, and I'm like so unbelievably nervous, like there's no way this lady's gonna say this to me. And the lady goes, what are you gonna do with all these matches? And I said, we just moved and our new house has a fireplace, so my mom sent me here. This is what my brother told me to say. And they sold them to me. So I ran out with this giant Santa Claus sized satchel of matches, hid them in the back of the station wagon that the dad drove me out, and then went back in the store with joining the family. And then we went home. He didn't even see the bag. I hid it. And then when he went in later at night, Eric snuck out, my older brother snuck out and removed this giant satchel of matches. So we set up the shop where we had side cutters, and we would cut off just the tops of the matches. And then these cardboard tubes at the job he worked, they had these tubes that were red, that they would tape them onto the back of a cardboard thing and then put something up on, like, buy Coca-Cola, these red tubes. So he would put a quarter on it and tape that off, a 25-cent piece, and then pour the match heads in there, and then have a wooden dowel, a piece of a broom, and pound that with a hammer. And he's having all the kids from the neighborhood come and cut these match heads. Then he would drill a hole in it and put a rocket igniter, and we had an orange box that had a switch on it. It was a tackle box with a big battery, a 12-volt battery, and a lamp switch and a big run of wire with alligator clips. So he buried 2 of those pipe bombs, exactly the diameter of the wheels of a Schwinn Stingray, because Jimmy Susu had a purple Schwinn Stingray he used to ride around. And again, I was brought in. They were all in the weeds, camoed out, with this pipe bomb set up with these 2 wire runs buried in the dirt. And I get Jimmy Susu to go race me in the pipeline. And that time I beat him. Because, I mean, I had a race bike and it was geared a little better. And I had really strong legs from riding wheelies all the time. That's all I did. My childhood, I was on 1 wheel. That was all you ever saw was me trying to impress the couple of girls that were around riding wheelies. So that transmutated into the music thing of playing guitar for me. It was like my train of thought. Now, back to the story. Of course, Jimmy Susu is 8 to 10 bike lengths behind me, flying. And when he gets to the thing, they throw the switch and these 2 mortars go off and blow all this dirt up, and he wipes out. And then goes home and tells his dad that there's claymore mines in the pipeline, and his dad's, had a couple of beers and slapping him around. That was the thing, that Jimmy Susu's dad was abusive to him. We used to always joke about that, because I think we drove by one time and saw his dad holding him upside down, spanking his naked bottom in through the picture window. We saw that. So it was like, whoa, like, the upside down thing with naked, like, that's like, poor kid, so maybe that explains why he's eating all the dog feces, for $1. So at one point I remember hanging out with him. We were going to break into this bird sanctuary, this area that was really a huge thicket, and I said I'd never been in there, and we called it the sanctuary, and it was like this like some lady's house that they had it all wired up and you couldn't penetrate it. And Jimmy Susu said he knew a way to get in there. We went over there. This is like 5 years after I've lived there. And here's a gun case. It was the guy from the cop chase from the beginning of the video threw his guns in there. And so he says, don't tell anybody. It's a 30-06 with a scope. So he says, don't tell anybody. I'm like, well, you're going to tell your dad. His dad had a bunch of rifles. I'm like, you guys are going to come and take these rifles. I'm like, we both found them. I'm like, we need to split this. So I, of course, told my brother, and he went and grabbed the guns. And my dad found them immediately and removed the firing pins and put them in the garbage. And there was a huge fight about that. And then I ended up removing the scope. So I had the scope. I kept that. These are all, I'm trying to tell pipeline stories about the pipeline. Now, my brother used to do this game called Smokey Bear, where he would climb up the power tower and light wooden matches. He would light these wooden matches and get them burning and then throw them down when it was dry to start a fire. And that didn't really work because the matches would blow out. So he tried using candles and melting the candles. We were up and down those power towers like it was nothing. We climbed them constantly. And eventually what he did was he had a broom handle with a jelly jar full of gasoline that he had connected with a wire wrap. And he would seal that jar and then put that through his belt loop or something, climb up there, then he would ignite the gasoline and then pour it. While all the neighborhood, because this game was called Smokey Bear. And he was the fire starter and we were Smokey Bear. We had to run around and put out the fires. So he had played Smokey Bear with all the neighborhood kids and then climbed down and they went in to play Atari. And, what's that sound? Oh, it's the fire brigade, because the entire field, they burned down like 2 blocks worth of foliage in that field burnt out from them not putting out their fires. Now, I know this is getting kind of long, and I've told this story in the tower. So I'm gonna, if you want more of this, you're gonna have to look at the tower. There's the tower 1 and 2, because there's more pipeline stories specifically about climbing the high tension wires. My neighbors had a statue. They were Catholic, and they had a statue in their front yard, the Szczesniak family. And my older brother was paid to watch their dog, feed their dog Don Juan when they went on vacation. They went on vacation all the time. So they had a slot machine. I know Don John used to have his dad's stag movies, and he would show these pornos and charge kids admission to come. Now my brother would have people would come. They had a huge liquor cabinet, and then they had a real slot machine and a pool table. So it was like they would pay him to have people come to their house, and like cigars and like the gambling and the shooting pool, and they're all drinking cocktails, like all of a slow gin rummy and like all these weird old fashions and like, you know, hot toddies and stuff. And the poor Don Juan is like holding his feces the whole time because they've never walked it. Well, they had this statue in their front yard. My brother called it Saint Jehoshaphat. And it was something about good fortune, and my brother hated that thing. So we had a siege on it where we all had guns and we were all in camouflage, and he had a chisel and he was going to put a bomb in it. He was going to chisel a hole in its head and put the bomb in there and then blow the head up. And when he chiseled it, the whole face fell off. And we were all shooting it with bottle rockets and BB guns and stuff. The whole neighborhood attacking this statue. And we all ran away when we knocked the face off, and we couldn't stop laughing. So then he took it, wrapped a rope around its neck, and on the CR-125, up and down the street, and the statue's going boom, ba-da-ba-ba-boom, ba-da-ba-ba-boom, and it's just covered in tar marks. So then he took it up on top of the power tower, poured gas on it, lit it on fire, and kicked it. It's a flaming Saint Jehoshaphat over and over again, because he felt this was a blasphemous, the statue, and you're only supposed to worship Jesus. So he thought that this was perfectly fine, that he did all this, even though these people were paying him to watch their house. So after all of this, he puts the statue back and doesn't say anything to them. And of course, they don't even say anything to him. They don't ask him. It's missing its face. It's completely charred, and it's got like road rash from it. So I should probably stop there, and definitely, I guess I'll put the link in the description for Storytime The Tower, because there's more of this carrying stuff up and throwing it off that leads to there's a payoff with that. So special thanks to Pete for telling me that you enjoyed this. I will try to go through my memory banks and put together more of these videos, because there's so many of them. But I would just encourage you to stay tuned and try to sludge your way through the drudgery of my videos. Subscribe and share and like. And again, special thanks to Pete. I know you're Bjorn's friend, but that shouldn't get in the way of you watching my videos and enjoying them. And the only reason that we weren't better friends was because I was a bad influence, and I knew you came from a good family, and you were a young guy, and I didn't want to drag you into me getting involved with the rock and roll and smoking and all the bad stuff, drinking beer, and all the stuff that I got involved with. So that's kind of why I didn't reach out and be your friend as much as I could have. I know I was friends with Kyle, but their family was much more Like, they didn't care that their kids had a punk rock band. That's how they were. So they were in a whole nother universe. And I was much more respectful of, like, Pete's family was more traditional European family, a good Catholic family, hardworking, good people. And I was so much older than this guy. When I did hanging around with him, I realized that he was so much younger than me. It would have been inappropriate for me to be around this guy. So that's why I never was as, like, cool to Pete, but I also never did anything cruel or mean to him that I remember. I remember coming in, I would come home from doing whatever I was doing, my thing, and him and my little brother, the entire basement would be covered with Star Wars toys or G.I. Joe. They had so many of these toys that there would be the biggest space on the floor that didn't have a toy on it would maybe be 2 inches square. Like, literally there, and it was a big basement. It wasn't small. It was a finished, like, full-size family room. Covered. Like, absolutely covered. And they would set them all up, and then I asked them once, I said, what happens when you set, like, do you eventually, like, have a war with these guys and they kill each other? And they were like, oh yeah, that's the whole point of what we do. So I was always unbelievably jealous of what they had, because they had this, like, honest, unadulterated, what kids are supposed to do. It isn't supposed to be all this wickedness and evil of what my older brother had brought us all down to that level. And I talk about this stuff that it's funny, but at the same time you have to understand what happened in the future to these people, that there are consequences connected with what you do. And choosing to go that low, I don't know, something about my older brother is not right. He still is having a hard time with his life because of his choices, and me too. I'm still, there's a lot of issues with me and things that happen to me that go back to if I would have made the right decision and put my foot down and went after good rather than evil. So it's something to think about, and I definitely bring it down. So I apologize for that, but at the same time, I'm not going to be afraid to share these stories because Pete said he enjoyed it. So look for more of this type of content, you guys, and thank you so much for joining me for story time.